Perfect, man. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and give the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Crypto World Radio. My name is Wabi. I host these spaces almost every day, and we like to onboard anyone from the Web3 space, whether that's a community contributor, people from venture capital space, dev space, and founder space. We welcome everything that contributes to the growth of digital assets within Web3. And if you guys are new over here at Because Bitcoin Twitter Spaces, feel free to give us a follow on our Twitter profile and turn on notifications so you can be made aware of when I host these spaces, as they are always tailored to the convenience of any given time zone to our guests. And our guest today is none other than Cosmos Joe, a very valuable core community contributor to the Cosmos spaces. Joe, I want to welcome you formally to the Because Bitcoin family. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come talk shop and introduce yourself to the community. And I'll start off by saying, how are you today, my man?
Doing well, man. I have a week off work, so I'm just trying to crank out some content this week. I got some great stuff coming up on my YouTube, on my spaces. I love interacting with the community, and I love making kind of educational focused material geared towards really like the beginner or like the beginner to intermediate, early adopter of crypto.
Perfect, man. I love that. I definitely feel like we do need those platforms. So that's why I want to kind of bring you in and learn a little bit about yourself today, Joe. So, Joe, I guess we can start off with saying what got you into the digital asset space, and also how did that journey lead you into the Cosmoverse?
Oh yeah, I'll give you the short version. I first heard of crypto in like 2012. Some dude tried to sell me some Bitcoin for $80. I had no idea what he was talking about. Um, I didn't even have a smartphone at the time. It was like 2011, 2012. So I didn't know what he was talking about. So I didn't buy the Bitcoin dollars like most people would have. But, fast forward to like 2016, 20, I did end up making a Coinbase account. I got into crypto, just kind of speculating or like straight up gambling on stuff I didn't know what I was doing. When bear market hit, I guess 2018, 2019, I just kind of got away from the space and I stopped learning about it until just before the last bull run. So I kind of was in and out, in and out. And now I'm focused on content creation, not only content creation, but staying as close to the space as possible just to kind of continue my own learning or like the next big thing that takes off, whether it be the next Luna, the next Avalanche, or just like what Matic, just so I could be on top of the space myself and kind of relay that information to an audience.
Awesome, Joe. Awesome. So, throughout your journey doing these spaces and doing YouTube videos, what do you think the missing link is in order to onboard people from Web 2 onto Web 3? Do you think it's a specific application that has to be built within the ecosystem? I know Timmy is building his stuff at Interchain and also Spark IBC. But for yourself, what do you think that missing link is?
Oh man, good question. Good question. I think that first of all, as a content creator, I think too many content creators position themselves as experts, and it's definitely a turnoff to the beginner when they can't even follow a conversation, or if the person is not really the expert that they would like themselves to be. I think that's number one. Content creators have to get better, including myself. I think that the developers who are building all this stuff need to gear their documents to the beginner, the early adopter, the people that are getting onboarded, and the websites have to be a little bit more familiar looking to not only users like me, but also traditional investors. They have to be able to go to a website and it has to look organized. It has to look structured like an actual company. Otherwise, I don't think we'll get the influx across the board that people are expecting in the next bull run. I think that people will continue to play it safe and stick to Bitcoin and Ethereum until we have more just user-friendly docs, better content out there on multiple platforms and also just better UIs. I mean, I think I might have missed something major there, but those are the three that kind of motivate me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you when it comes to user interface, and definitely things regarding interchain are geared towards that, right? We have things like Stargaze, Juno Swap, Osmosis, and when you go onto those applications, they look really nice. It's easy to navigate. Now we just need like that killer ecosystem, right? Something that can be sort of not really chain agnostic, but have bridges towards the broader Web3 ecosystem, right? Things that can not only port to things like the Move VM, right, which is what Sui and Aptos are built on, but also the traditional EVMs, right? And that's where I think platforms like Saga that are geared towards that, and their primary focus is, all right, how do we capture the overall attention from Web 2 onto Web 3? So instead of making a platform where it's just geared towards users like me and you, they cater towards the individual that, that prefers the clean UX and prefers easier navigation, click of a button, right? And not so much going from website to website, just a bridge, right? And I think we're definitely geared towards that. So, given that we're now shifting the conversation towards innovation, Joe, I know you found yourself in a position where you're talking to all these devs, all these contributors. I see we have Soy from the Neutron team. Shout out to Soy. And also we have Deebs. Both of these gentlemen have hosted on prior spaces. Absolute legends. If you guys are in the crowd, feel free to follow them. And so, with the current market dynamics, we're seeing all of these innovations going on in the background. I know Cosmos is building sort of like their own NFT chain. I know they have Stargaze, but there's also this one protocol called Aura. Now, I don't want to start getting into shilling specific products, but it's more along the lines of we're seeing a general inflow of dev power and community power, right? It's now gotten to a point where, at any time of the day, there's some sort of Cosmos based space, right? Overall Cosmos Hub interchain activity, especially with the guys over at Juno. So with that being said, Joe, what are some innovations that that you've learned over the past couple of months that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned NFTs. I definitely think there's a lot of room for NFTs to grow. I think anyone that's overlooking NFTs, not as a JPEG or art necessarily, but as the actual, programmable token that can be used in DeFi.
Hey, Joe, you cut off there for a second, brother. You're cutting off. Mr. Producer, are you able to hear Joe?
You got me
Oh
now?
yeah, you're good. You're good now. You're good now. You cut off. You
Okay.
cut off after you said NFT on DeFi.
Yeah, I was going to say NFTs using DeFi, NFTs bridging, entertainment industry, whether it be gaming, um, streaming services, things like that, bridging that to blockchain. I would like to see that get pushed a hell of a lot further than these like 10,000 piece generative art collections that don't really have a utility beyond, you know,
Joe, you cut off again, brother. Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Am I good?
Oh, the sound quality is a lot better now. Whatever you
Okay, no
just
problem.
did, yeah,
No
it's
problem.
a lot
I'm not
better
gonna.
now.
I've been pacing around the room. I'm going to stay right here where I'm at, and I lost I ditched the headset, so hopefully this is better. Yeah, I was just talking about how technology as it relates to NFTs needs to get pushed a lot further than it has been. NFTs have an opportunity. There's an opportunity there to onboard people who have never heard of crypto and maybe don't need to initially. Um, that and also I'm talking to a lot more protocols that are able to create the products that mimic traditional banking services, whether it be lending, whether it be uh, giving access to capital for these businesses that are building, whether it be blockchain applications or just utilizing tooling on the blockchain to, operate a real life business. So hopefully that answered your question and I didn't break up too much at the end.
No problem, man. No problem. So, speaking of things like traditional businesses and all of that, one thing that I was discussing with a fellow colleague of mine are things regarding gaming, right? If you're a gamer, then some of us still enjoy going to the game store and all that stuff, getting in our pre-order. And if you were aware, the PS5 was like out of stock for the longest time. So what if you had the ability to sort of have this alpha pass NFT to have pre-orders, right? And with those pre-orders, you get some perks, like you get exclusive access to pre-ordering certain games before GameStop even has access to them, right? And then that can loop in with NFT collections, right? Say like Yuga Labs. Say if you had a special alpha season pass, right? Similar to Fortnite, where they have season passes, and of course they all rotate in the type of content they have. What if you have that in Web 2, right? Where you're able to have an experience as a front end user to use these NFTs, right, or these skins, as Fortnite has them, and you get alpha drops, right? You get exclusive access to pre-order this NFT that gives you exclusive access, and on that end, it would prevent onboarded users into Web3 to not participate in things like gas wars or whitelist wars, right? As many of you individuals have experienced, whenever you try to get whitelisted for an NFT project, sometimes you have things like bots, right? That they just front run everything, and they just mass produce a lot of fake emails, and then there's also all sorts of fraud from within the internal team, make up a lot of like fake wallet addresses and all that stuff. And I think there's a real use case for that, right? And I feel that with this current market cycle, there's not many individuals left, right? But the ones that remain, such as yourself and myself, we're trying to onboard people from outside the Web3 ecosystem. Like as passionate as I am about all things interchain, right? And by interchain, I mean not just like things building on the Cosmos Hub, but also things like Aptos, right? Things like Celestia, Fuel Labs, right? Namada, Anoma, like these real innovative things that are just building for the interchain overall. And I feel like if we start with the smallest things, such as NFT accessibility and things relating to GameFi, I think there's some real potential. And moving on to the topic of GameFi, Joe, I'd love to know like your prospect of it. I know. We had a prior discussion about that. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how you see like any sort of GameFi developments so far with the experience you're having now, talking to all these devs, community members, and all things like that.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people building games. I think gaming is just a piece of what I would consider blockchain based entertainment, right? Could be sports, could be streaming services. And what you mentioned, attaching a gated access to an NFT collection, to me is what I would like to see more of immediately. I think it's the easiest utility to add to an NFT, right? Gated access. And I do have a collection coming, and that will be the use case of it. There'll be a gated access feature, whether it be online gated access or in real life gated access. I think that's the easiest thing to roll out. You could use NFTs to identify your hardcore gamers that now have early access to a game or reduced cost access to a streaming service or just access to information, right? I think that's definitely needed. NFTs can do this in a way that Web 2 cannot, because I don't want to put my email address in. I don't want you to have my credit card on file. Why do I need to give you my address? You're never going to mail me anything, right? So NFTs allow people to remain anonymous, at least to the platform. Maybe they're going to eventually buy their NFTs with a credit card, but the platform does not need that information on file for me to play a game for 5 minutes, right? And I think when gamers, traditional gamers who, in general, from what I hear, are very skeptical of NFTs, they don't want anything to do with them. When they realize that they don't get bled out by a platform or by a gaming company, anymore, I think they'll start to understand why NFTs are useful. I don't think every game is going to be able to incorporate NFTs. I definitely don't think that. I don't think every game should try to incorporate crypto or NFTs, but there will be games that are built around NFTs. And I think that as long as the games are fun and they're easy to access with like 1 or 2 clicks, I think that this will be just another rail to onboard people who never thought they'd be using crypto at all.
So, Joe, now that we have things like Twitter Spaces, and there are like sort of these sub DAOs, right, with these spaces, and building all sorts of applications on top of the Cosmos Hub for a social aspect. When you got into crypto, what resources did you have to use in order to navigate the cryptoverse?
Wow. There were not good resources. It would take me days to find out something that should only take 5 minutes. Just sending a simple transaction. If you went to YouTube and you were like, all right, let me find someone that's doing this, these videos were just, first of all, they were not clear. If you were able to find a video talking about what you actually wanted to do, there was so much like uncertainty, because you're like, wow, what if my transaction doesn't go through? What if I copy and paste the wrong address? It was always a catastrophe at the other end if you didn't do it perfect. So the first time I transferred crypto to a wallet, it was like a 2-day ordeal. The first time I supplied liquidity on Uniswap, again, it was a multi-day ordeal. And that's even, where MetaMask was pretty decent 2 years ago, three years ago, right? MetaMask wasn't bad compared to what was out there, but it was still not great. And for me, I'm like, wow, if I click this wrong or I do something wrong, I'm going to lose this much of my portfolio. And I also don't want to do a microtransaction because the gas fees are $100, right? So it was really not great. It's definitely getting better. I still think, I don't want to say anything negative about Ethereum. Ethereum is still the undisputed champ in, everything DeFi and NFTs. Right? I don't think Ethereum's going anywhere, but really it was like MetaMask and not anything else back then.
Man, you're taking me back now. I remember those days, dude. I remember those days. I even remember, this is the biggest pain trade. Now get ready for this. The biggest pain trade in my entire life was being too impatient to buy Hex on Uniswap. And I remember it clear as day. It was right around like middle of January, late January, and I wanted to swap like a couple of ETH into Hex, and the transaction would just cancel and cancel and cancel and cancel, and it would just be in an infinite loop. And I'm like, you know what? Forget about it, right? And and I had thought like I don't know what's going on here. I've done these little transactions, right? Like when I first started using Uniswap, it was the most basic thing, swapping USDC for 0x or Maker, right? Little test things, right? And before that, I had used things on Tron, like Tron Bet, Tron Roulette, things on Neo. If you remember Neo,
Oh
Neo
yeah.
actually, I think Neo was like the very second DeFi application that came out after IDEX. And it was like the strangest UI I have ever come across. And I was like, man, this thing has to be streamlined, right?
It was possible, like I would say 5 years ago, to know quite a bit about the tokens that were out there and not even know they had applications that they were used in, because the information was so bad. Like you could just think, oh, I have Tron. It's on a centralized exchange. That's all I could do with it is trade it. And you were perfectly fine doing that, because there was just no way to know that they were actually building applications, and there was a wallet and there were things you could do with the tokens. I I don't remember the first time I took my tokens off a centralized exchange, but I definitely think that the first app I ever used was like Uniswap 3 years ago. And I don't think I knew you could do anything with tokens besides that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. even EOS had games, and I believe Wax had a few had a few dApps as well. But like the front,
But where would you find out about them? That was the thing.
yeah,
You had to like know someone who accidentally found out about it. And I only had one friend who dealt with crypto back then, and he lived cross country, and we would just text each other, and he would try to teach me things in like a text, and it was okay because I ended up finding out about the tokens you're naming are all familiar, like Tron, EOS, Neo. There were a bunch of others. Ethereum Classic, Ethereum, even Litecoin. But man, it was so hard to find out any information that I almost feel bad criticizing some of these white papers and documents and UIs, but they're still not good enough. And if anything, they're more confusing than having no information. So that's where I'm at right now, is like someone I'm an educator, but I'm learning at the same time. The stuff needs to get better. And you mentioned what Spark IBC is building. That is like the mega landing page for the Cosmos ecosystem, and will be built out to include a lot more than Cosmos, I'm sure.
yeah, man, we love Timmy. I've hosted him about 2 times now. I've had him on my panel. I love what him and his business partners are building out with Interchain Info, and I believe there's like a good value proposition to say like, all right, if I'm a new user in Web3, it's going to take me a while to find things like DeFi Pulse, DeFi Llama, what have you. So my next stop is Twitter, right? And seeing the activity that a lot of the interchain community is doing, right? You'll find them on like ETH spaces, you'll find them on Solana spaces, and that's what I really like. It's not so much being a Cosmos maxi; it's being an interchain maxi. And if you focus more on things interchain, then the value proposition of a probability where there are more users excited about this tech and to be more involved is highly favorable, right? And I know I mentioned this a lot, but a good example of that was what Terra had, in 2020, 2021, where there's this nice sleek UI, there's all these dApps, and that community, I believe they were the pioneers to encourage other ecosystems to be up on spaces, right? Like any random day you would see someone from TFL on a space speaking, interacting with a community member, always receiving feedback. And that's one thing that that I've really enjoyed about these Twitter spaces. You can also get in touch with content creators like yourself on here, more easily accessible. Back then, whew, man, the only like resources that I had were individuals like Chico Crypto and Ian Bellina, and it was this whole like rigorous process to even get in touch with them, given how crazy scams were. Like if you think scams are all over the place with Twitter, dude, if you opened up the wrong Telegram group, if you opened up the wrong Discord, they would just your wallet would just be drained, right? So a lot of these people, they wouldn't really be easily accessible. And now, I've been following Ian Bellina for like 5 years now, and a couple of weeks ago, he was hosting a space, and Joe, it barely had 25 people. So I'm like, there's my opportunity. I have to introduce myself because I've been trying to get in contact with him for so many months and all that stuff. And here we are, about a month and a half later, and we're in contact now, and it's like, wow, man, you never truly know the opportunities that await you via a Twitter space. You can run into anybody, and it can be a small space, and boom, right there, connection made. And
Yeah, I can't agree more. Twitter Space. First of all, I've only had my Twitter for a little over a year, but it was exactly a year ago. It was during ETH Denver when I was on my first Twitter Space, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but they just gave me a microphone, and I was able to ask like the CEO of a company a question, and I was like, you know what? Twitter Space, first of all, there will be people who only sign up for Twitter Spaces, and they never look at their Twitter feed, because Twitter itself is a massive distraction. And even if there's good information, it will get lost in hours, right? Um, Twitter Spaces to me is basically people are practicing live on how to be excellent podcasters. And the next Joe Rogan is going to be someone who started off on Twitter Spaces. And the next great investor is going to be someone who is able to interact with the CEO on Twitter Spaces. I mean, they're interactive podcasts that you could pop up at any time, and your audience is not limited to people who happen to subscribe to you. There are people that just pop in and out of Twitter Spaces, even if it's nothing that they find interesting, just to hear what's going on. And I think Twitter Spaces is the best social media platform feature across the board. And it's interesting that you kind of have a similar take on it. I really think that sky's the limit for Twitter Spaces. I think they could charge money for Twitter Spaces and people pay it, or they should pay it.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. I know there's an integration working with Twitter and Mask Network. That's Mask, not the other Mask, which is like a privacy browser. And with that, you'll be able to transfer assets on the Twitter platform. And that gives a proposition of Twitter turning into an actual Web3 based platform. And there are many protocols coming out, such as Lens Protocol and their graph technology, right? And that's coming from the bright mind of Stani, who created Aave, right? So you're having actual infrastructure being built out to also help out with existing product, right? So instead of the notion of Web3 with Web2 features, it should be, how about we integrate within Web2 so that the end user isn't really aware of what's going on, right? So I believe there was a thread that was put out by one of my suggestions. I can't remember their profile by the life of me, but he said something along the lines of like, not NFT, like there's going to be an NFT one day of Call of Duty. No, my bad. It was something along the lines of, there won't be NFTs on Call of Duty, but there will be Call of Duty with NFTs. So instead of there being an NFT with Call of Duty likeness and gameplay features, there are going to be developers that cater to that audience to be integrated within the existing product, right? And if you're a gamer, again, like myself, you enjoy the flagship product, right? Similar to crypto, people enjoy the flagship product, and that flagship product at the current moment is Ethereum, right? And of course, we do have like other ecosystems like Cosmos, which I strongly believe is that ecosystem to have had survived this past bear market, right? And even though individuals are saying, "Oh, Ethereum is like a staple product," individuals forget that during the last bear market, everyone was calling it a scam. They were all saying that like all Ethereum was used for was for individuals to buy Ethereum, send it to an ICO address, and get their fake token, right? Another ERC token to be dumped on the very next day on Binance for a 20x, 30x, 40x, right? And then, fast forward a couple years later, Ethereum is this sort of programmable money of sorts, right? Where you now have things like NFT finance, right? Something like SudoSwap, which is literally the NFT equivalent of Uniswap's AMM, but it has unique features and all that stuff. But I don't want to get too technical, but it would be pretty cool if Twitter became this sort of ultimate Web3 DApp, you know, and perhaps something like Interchain Info and Spark IBC can be like a flagship product within the cryptoverse, right? And I definitely agree with you that Twitter Spaces is definitely is a whole new different platform built on top of Twitter, right? And I agree with you that Twitter itself, as far as the feed, is very, very, very distracting, right? And it's more noise than signal. But through Twitter Spaces, I've met individuals like Deebs and Soy and other people building within the Cosmos ecosystem, and also community members, right? Like I see we have Slinks down here, and she's always active on Cosmos Spaces, and she's always sending me some alpha drops. Within the broader like interchain ecosystem and all that stuff, and that wasn't there before. If you do right by people on these spaces, if you communicate thoroughly, and you come genuinely to people and saying, hey, I'm here to learn, I want to grow within the ecosystem and eventually give some contribution, people will give it to you, man. And that's why, like, I've grown to like individuals like yourself that come in with a pure golden heart and have shown nothing but value, man. I appreciate the work that you do here.
Oh, thanks, man. Definitely appreciate it. And yeah, I think the last thing I'll say about Twitter Spaces is you get to talk to the real person, and it's super interactive. And like I said, it doesn't take any planning. I've been on spaces that just got started up, and then, they're unrecorded, informal spaces. And then that ends up being people who I, would go to for a business partnership or of some sort, should my channel grow to that magnitude. So yeah, totally. If you can be bullish on social media, I think it would be Twitter Spaces. Maybe will be its own app in the next year or two. I think could be where it's going. It might overtake Twitter itself.
Yeah, man. I think once they add in things like super chats and also the ability of, say, like yourself, right? You're building your NFT collection, right? So what if there was like a cool feature that you can implement that gives you a count of how many times somebody has come into your Twitter space, right? Like like if
Yep,
that feature is
exactly.
rolled out and I go into your Twitter space and then you have like a little stat that says how many times has King Wabi gone into my Twitter space? What is the average amount that he has stayed in my Twitter space, right? How many times has he spoken on my Twitter space? How long has he spoken on my Twitter space? And through little things like this, there can be added perks like, oh, if you participate within Joe's space, you qualify for this NFT, right? And it can be something like, all right, we're in a Twitter space, and then um, like something goes off where like King Wabi has cleared like 10 hours on Joe's Twitter spaces, and you're able to gift an NFT live on the Twitter space. You simply click on my profile, right? Like when you click on somebody's profile on a Twitter space, it brings up an entirely different UI. Send direct message, invite to speak, remove, report and remove, and block and remove. What if you had a little feature that says like wallet, right? Like send X, Y, and Z to wallet, and you can just transfer an asset right into their wallet directly, live on a Twitter space, and it notifies everybody that you had sent them an asset, right? That can be an NFT, and then that NFT allows them to go into your ticket, your quote unquote ticket spaces, right, which are more intimate, more private, more of like a private presentation. And through there, right, through there, perhaps you can have a Twitter space where you feature a lot of like core contributors in the cosmos, right? Like the other day I hosted Zaki Manian, right? What if there was like a space where it had Zaki, where it had Jay, and a lot of other like core contributors from outside ecosystems, like an Ethereum dev, right? Like Stani, right? Or like Hayden from Uniswap. I think that would be pretty cool, and it would allow for a more like intimate and more educational sort of space. So would love to know your thoughts on that value proposition.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most basic use cases of NFTs is that you could use them to map back to a wallet and not necessarily a person. And I one of my first interviews on YouTube I did with someone who developed this NFT that's like a filter so that you could go on camera and then the NFT is showing and mimicking your facial expressions and like kind of talking for you so that you don't have to be your actual self on a Zoom call, let's say, or Snapchat, something like that. And the whole theme was he was talking about this idea of pseudonymous, pseudonymous identity, where you're not anonymous, an online persona or identity versus your private, so that you have your privacy, but you could still be quote unquote yourself through these social channels. NFTs can allow that. If I'm on Twitter Spaces, like you said, and I want to use NFTs to take attendance, let's say, for my Twitter Spaces, so I could direct some rewards back to them. I don't need to know who the person is, right? They don't have to tell me their name or give me their wallet address. I could use the NFT to drop rewards to certain people or enter them in a raffle or something like that. They're not going to be anonymous to Twitter, right? Twitter's still going to know who they are, but I don't need to know who they are. I just know them as that PFP, let's say, or that person who uses that NFT as their PFP. So yeah, no, I definitely on the same page with you there as well.
Yeah, man, and I think things like augmented reality are going to help facilitate that. And I think we're a lot closer to that than people realize.
Yeah, no, I have an NFT that can be used as a Snapchat filter, and the fact that it's NFT means that it is one of a kind asset, right? It's not the generic filters on Snapchat that everybody uses the same one. And it was an NFT collection that was dropped like a year ago, something like that. And I have not used it for its intended purpose, but I have it, and I think it could be used on Snapchat, Zoom, and a couple other of these like conferencing platforms, right? So again, you could maintain privacy, but you could have a conversation with someone, right? And it's along the lines of leveraging the NFT tech beyond the collectible or the PFP function that most, I would say most NFT collections now, the prime utility that we've seen besides speculation is just kind of identifying communities that kind of rally around the same collection. But then it's fleeting, right? Because if there's no deeper utility, they kind of move on to the next big thing as people's attention gets diverted.
It definitely has to be more fun. And so I feel like with NFTs, as good as it is to speculate a lot, there should be an incentive to use these protocols, right? There should be an incentive to navigate with these assets. And rolling back on that, now that we have things like Twitter Spaces, now that we have community-based things like NFTs and all these nice UIs that are being built out, and we have some exciting innovation, right? Even though we had quite the year in crypto in 2022, throughout that destruction, you still had builders building, right? You still have Celestia building. You still have Saga building, right? You still have Timmy building. So with that being said, I feel that spaces have reunited that community that would once be lost if it was 2018 and we didn't really have these means of communications, right? Like back then, all we had were telegrams and discords, and they would just go radio silent. So, my next question to follow up with all that, now that we've had some general, broader interchain discussion, would be for you going through 2018 and of course 2022 in a sentiment level basis, how was everything navigating in comparison to 2018? How would you compare the two now since you've survived both of those years? I would love to know your standpoint on that and your experience through it. Given that I also experienced the same thing, always love communicating with people that survived that awful year that was 2018.
Yeah, I mean, I had no incentive to stay engaged. Right now, like I wasn't in social circles. Like I did not have Discord. I didn't have Twitter. I just had Coinbase, Binance, and like the accounts. Once the bear market hit, a couple of the YouTubers that I was following just stopped making videos, and I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to log in because the prices are terrible, and I don't want to sell anything because I don't want to sell something at like a 95% loss and then just buy it back later. So I just logged out of my accounts for like a year plus. I did log in once, and the day that I logged in, Ethereum was like $150, and I had like $160 in my account. I bought one and I logged out. Like that was it. Now there's more incentive to stick around because there's more social engagement, and a lot of it is around NFT communities. And I think, like I said earlier, if there are people that are still sleeping on or disregarding the value that not all NFTs, but the NFT space as a whole brings to crypto, I think they're just making a big mistake. It's almost like overlooking, the next big altcoin or the next, major app on Ethereum or whatever the case might be.
Loving the discussion here, Joe. Loving the discussion. I absolutely love this topic that we're covering with NFTs, your experience, everything regarding what me and you have in common. Using Uniswap and having some trouble with that in its early stages. So I want to open up the discussion to our broader audience. If anyone here is new on the Because Bitcoin Twitter Spaces, my name is Wabi. I'm in charge of the digital asset content creation here for our Twitter Spaces. I host these pretty much every day, and I tailor it to the time schedule and constraints of our guests. And I'm here joined by Cosmos Joe, a very valuable Cosmos community contributor. He has a YouTube channel, he has his Twitter page. He's always active on these spaces. Feel free to give him a follow. And with that being said, again, one more time, if you're a listener here in our audience and want to come up and give any statements or ask any questions, feel free to do so. Although there are some rules, please keep it formal and casual to the topic in discussion. And we'll allow a few moments if anyone wants to come up. I see we have Tempest, Lynx. I see we have Tank as well. I think I've seen him around, I believe. Soy, if you want to come up and say what's up as well. Nicholas, Lab. Shout out to him for shout out to him for yesterday. He kind of helped me out with the Twitter Spaces problem that we had yesterday. Crypto Cowboy, Sisu. If any of you gentlemen want to come up and I also see we have Deebs. If you guys want to come up and join the convo, give a statement or ask a question to Joe, now's the time to do so. We are past that 45 minute limit, so for the next few moments, we'll be taking individuals to come up. See, we have one individual, Deebs.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, man.
Sweet. Thanks for the thumbs up. Yeah, I don't think I've been on a space with Joe before, but obviously your reputation precedes you in a good way, of course. But pleasure to meet you, make your acquaintance, and yeah, Wabi, thanks for having me up here. I just wanted to I wanted to jump in on the discussion. I was listening a lot when you were talking about, I guess, like the simplification of DeFi, and you guys were kind of talking about it from the, I think Joe, you mentioned, when we talk about like bridging assets in between ecosystems, and I was just reading an article today, published by OB Wallet, which is providing like tech, basically like wallet tech, because I think we all often forget that, right? Like one of the first places that it starts, like the interaction really starts with the wallet, right? Because users have to create a wallet in order to interact with Web3. And I'll open up the question here too. But I think some of like the most unique things that I'm seeing right now, and I'm curious, Joe, maybe if you've seen them elsewhere inside of Cosmos, but like just this idea of like, moving away from seed phrases towards like more traditional things you would experience, like multi-factor authentication, also like session keys, right? So like this idea that like, and I just tweeted about this, but it's like, why would you want to, every time you log into a web page, or like, let's say you're playing a DeFi game, have to sign transactions as you go, right? So like, what if you had wallets that had secondary accounts that you can give permissions to basically allow you to be logged in? So I think I just wanted to kind of bring up that point, because we often get so caught up with like, all right, how do we make this easier to move assets from, Atom to Juno or Osmosis, right? Like building that experience within crypto, but we forget about like the access point, which is often the wallet, and simplifying that for users. So there was a lot of really great stuff in the article. I'm happy to share it or pin it up here, but I just wanted to bring that up.
I think we have to get to the point where the wallets basically ask you, what do you want to do, right? Oh, I want to supply liquidity on Wind. Okay. Do you have any tokens on Wind? No. Okay. Do you want to move your tokens from Atom or Stargaze or Evmos? And you just check a box. And I think there needs to be almost like a tutorial function in some of the wallets. But I do think the wallets have gotten simpler. So there's a trade-off there. The wallets are very simple now. Kepler's pretty amazing. There are a couple others that I looked at. I know Polkadot's wallets got a lot better. And then what's the Solana one, to me, is like the most simple
Phantom
wallet. So I think they can't get simple and customized at the same time, but I think there'll be just more variety. And I'm dying to try the new Leap wallet. I'm supposed to talk to those guys on Spaces soon. Cosmos Station I use like once. I'm happy with the wallets, but you brought up something with like the seed phrases. There's got to be a better way than that, and there's no one that's gonna come over to Web3 from Web2 and be eager to like write down a bunch of seed phrases on Post-its and then like think they're okay just like leaving them in their gun safe or like putting them in their safe deposit box. That's weird to me, and it's okay for now, but there has to be a remedy for that.
Yeah, 100%. And the other point I didn't bring up too was like gas fees, right? So this concept of like you have a wallet, but if you don't have like gas fees already in it, you're dead in the water, right? And so you kind of have to like get around that. And so I think that's like another thing that some wallet tech is building, like gas fee like leasing, where you basically like incur debt on the wallet, and then in the next transaction that you make, it basically pulls you pay off that debt. So I think like innovative ways like that to kind of, I'm not saying the user would actually like see that, but it's like abstracting it away from the user so that it's a lot more of a seamless onboarding experience, I think is key. And definitely tutorials, to your point as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know most people don't want to hear this, but I think there's going to be a category of wallets that literally looks exactly like PayPal and is linked to your bank account or your credit card. And I think that's not a bad way to onboard people that are like my parents' age, because if we want to be serious, most of the money, the disposable income and the investment income that's available, it's going to be in that like, 55 and over category. My dad is not memorizing a seed phrase. My mom is not going to, go on to osmosis, but there's got to be a class of products for that demographic. Otherwise, you'll be waiting a lot longer than a lot of us hope for this like quote unquote mass adoption. And whether it's have a wallet that you could load from a credit card and then just hold a basket of assets because you want to speculate or quote unquote invest on the price going up, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you could do that at the wallet level, I believe.
Why do you think that's not popular? I was just kind of curious about your initial comment.
I think most people in crypto have like this idea that you're always going to be able to do everything anonymously with no oversight and just do all these transactions and move across chains in secret. And I just don't think that's realistic for people living in the United States where I live. I just don't think that's ever going to happen. So we have to be okay with at least some of this DeFi being regulated in a way that's going to allow more access. And I think that regulation that's going to come for Bitcoin is going to be really positive because it's going to allow institutions to, kind of get their feet in the water before other competitors in other countries and whatnot. But for DeFi, I don't think it's realistic to think that all these people are going to transact anonymously and we're never paying taxes on this transaction. I just don't think that's happening. I live in New York, man. I'm lucky that we even got an exchange here.
Yeah, man. Especially with the bit license and all that stuff.
I mean, this state shook down all of the casinos, all of the online casinos, and now the crypto exchanges for this pay to play model. Yeah. That's not even great because it's a one-time purchase, right? It's like a one-time purchase. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know. New York is almost in a class of its own because it's the only state where some of the exchanges won't even deal. Like there's no Binance here. They're in all the other states. Yeah. So
I think a lot of the innovation, just to wrap up, gentlemen, we only have like a few minutes left. I'm going to try to wrap up in the next 2 to 3 minutes. But I definitely feel like as far as regulatory aspects are concerned, I feel like a lot of the innovation, if it's not openly accepted here in America, then they're just going to go over to Singapore. They're going to go over to Japan. They're going to go over to pretty much the other side of the world. They're going to go to Dubai, right? And, that's what we're finding out now. Regardless of what happened to Celsius, FTX, yada, 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 you still have a lot of innovation going on the other side of the world, especially with Dubai, opening up their country to things like Sandbox to build out their metaverse and have offices within Sandbox's metaverse. And that brings me back to our key point in one of our conversations today, is that, it's all about integrating within Web 2 and having Web 3 technologies be on the back end. But if it's on the back end, it has to enhance the front end, right? And that's what it's all about, and that's what ultimately I believe the use case for Web3 is, and of course ownership. So with that being said, Deebs, thank you for coming up, man, and giving your statements and your questions and thoughts. And Joe, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me in this conversation. And a big thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to follow us here on Because Bitcoin here on our Twitter and turn on bell notifications. And I know I repeat myself a lot when I say that, but unfortunately, that's too bad for you. And good for me, right? Because that increases our Twitter count, that expands our reach. And, talking about casinos, I want to take the opportunity to announce that one of our guests in March will be Rollbit, and I am a man of my word. And I had stated earlier this month that going into late February, going into March and Q2, Crypto World Radio will be going a severe rebrand and hosting more content creators, hosting more platforms that are adding in a lot of value propositions to Web3. And so look forward to Rollbit, look forward to GMX next week, look forward to Say Network, look forward to Dimension XYZ, look forward to Fuel Labs, and a few other things in the works, but thought I might take the time to say that, given that today is a smaller audience, right? And for those of you who just came into space and want to catch up, it'll be uploaded onto our YouTube in a couple of hours, but you can feel free to take a listen to our recording, right? Our producer is currently doing two things at once. Also, shout out to our hardworking producers, Mr. Producer himself, who's on the back of our Because Bitcoin Twitter profile. And if you guys want to catch up on any of the content that I've put out this week, I hosted Ben Cowan from Into the Cryptoverse yesterday, so feel free to check that out on our YouTube. And we'll be back tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, where I'll be hosting White Whale. It's a protocol built on Cosmos, and they're building out their own chain. So feel free to check that out. An announcement will be made by the end of the day on my profile, and then it'll be shared tomorrow via the Because Bitcoin Twitter profile, where you guys can set a reminder and all of those things. So I encourage you all to follow the Because Bitcoin handle and turn on bell notifications so you can be made aware of when my spaces go live, where we cover crypto-specific content along with our other spaces, which are more macro, commodities, emerging markets based. So thank you all so much. Joe, did you want to say one last thing? Where can people follow you, brother?
Yeah.
Where can people follow you?
Right before I jumped on this space, the real reason why I was late, I was interviewing David from White Whale. Absolutely fascinating protocol, blockchain, tokenomics. I'm gonna drop that video ahead of 4 other ones that I have queued up because I think people need to watch this video. And the guy was schooling me from top to bottom in this, and you'll just see my mouth drop many times during the video. I'll release it in coordination, like right after your spaces end. I'll have it hit YouTube like 20 minutes, half hour later. What they're doing, I've never seen anyone do in any ecosystem. But yeah, that's an awesome guest to have tomorrow. It's going to be awesome, man.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you guys. So without further ado, feel free to follow Joe. Feel free to follow Deebs. You can also find Joe on YouTube. Joe, what's your YouTube handle so people can check out your content?
If you just search Cosmos Joe, it comes up first, even though that's not my YouTube handle. But easiest thing to do in my Twitter profile, I have a link tree. If you just follow jump in my Telegram, it's only announcements. There's no like conversation to follow. And I just put giveaways in there, my YouTube videos that I think are good, and just notifications for spaces, maybe like 5 to 7 messages a week. Very easy to follow. And then if you like my YouTube, then you could subscribe. If you don't like it, you could stay in the Telegram and get giveaways.
Perfect, man. All right, guys, without further ado, thank you so much for tuning in, and God bless you all. Take care.
The trading current is just math. It's just math. It has a 95.45% hit rate when we deviate outside of CP2 and CN2. All you had to do is recognize that 95% of the time when we get over here, under this blue line, we get some sort of mean reversion. So let's just assume you long right here. 95 out of 100 times, when I buy this, I'm going to get some sort of bounce. It's just math. Look what would have happened as we move up. Look at the bounce that came after. And now look where we are. If you had just blindly followed the current, you take all emotions out of it, and you say, I'm going to trust the statisticians, you would have bought Dow Jones somewhere down here under 30,000. You know, depending on how you want to measure it from absolute top to bottom, 20% move. We also have multi-time frame alerts. You don't even have to be at your computer on TradingView. You can ping your phone. Now, the current has some really awesome features, and I would urge you guys to join our Discord to get access to it. We give it away for free as a tool to the community. It's just math. There's really no need to overcomplicate things, not even in the slightest.